This is Elizabeth Garber, author of Implosion, a memoir of an architect's daughter, and you are listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world, in our ongoing quest to seek out and visit with other architecture podcasts. We've had wonderful conversations in the past with host Frances Anderton, Donna Sink, Steve Chung, Josh Cooperman, David Lee and Marina Bourderonnet, Bob Borson, and Debbie Millman. And hey, Roman Mars, how about being 99% visible and returning our emails?
Yeah.
We're coming for you, Roman. But today on the show, two talented architect podcasters from different ends of the country. Della Hansmann of the Mid Mod Remodel Podcast in Wisconsin and Catherine Meng of the Design Voice Podcast in California. Later on, a few minutes with Frank Harmon reading from his book Native Places. And now your host, someone with no architectural training background or licensure whatsoever, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hi, folks. I do love it when people call or email, usually call, and ask if I'll design their modernist house. Funny, it's never for a remodel, come to think of it. So before I let on that I'm not an architect and that I don't design houses for people, I slyly say that I only work with a very limited and exclusive number of clients, which is true, as that number is 0. And I casually mention that the minimum fee to even take the first meeting is $1 million, payable up front. That usually produces a long, confused pause on the other end, after which I let them off the hook and fess up, much to their amusement and mine. Fortunately, I know many great architects across the world who design exemplary modernist houses. The real issue, as I share with these prospective clients for someone, is the builder. Most residential contractors just don't have the skill set or infrastructure to build a house that has lots of steel, glass, concrete, or anything else other than wood. They can pour a driveway, but they can't cantilever arched concrete out over a 45-degree drop.
Darn, I could do that.
And why should they, really? When most developers build stud-laden 2-stories with pointy roofs, granite countertops, and average-size windows. So the key is to find which builders built the modernist houses you love to drive by in your area, and then connecting them with your architect as soon as possible. Don't wait until your house is all designed. You'll be much happier than hiring your cousin Jolene, who insists that her successful contracting company has no problem building a modernist house because she's built a total of 0 of them. Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In our continuing world of make-believe, modernist realtor Angela Roll was raised on a secluded modernist island in the Amazon, populated only by immortal warrior women with impeccable architectural taste. When architect Le Corbusier crashes his plane into this paradise, Princess Diana is too busy teaching a SoulCycle class and sends Angela to deal with him. Le Corbusier, after ranting in French about how Americans have no style,
Mon Dieu,
encourages Angela to leave the all-female sanctuary to enter the cynical world of gabled roofs and men for the first time. Ever since, on a mission to defend modernism, Angela deals with unreasonable sellers, unrealistic buyers, incompetent builders, as we've just been talking about, and bureaucratic city councils. They're the worst. While hoping to unlock the potential superpower of modernism the world has yet to fully appreciate. Modernist realtor Angela Roll is your superheroine. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL, or call her 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. I'm a big fan of Della Hansmann and the Mid Mod Remodel Podcast. My second favorite podcast from Madison, Wisconsin, after Michael Feldman's What Do You Know?, which was a radio show for decades before it became a podcast. Della studied architecture at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis and spent a decade working in custom residential, designing homes ranging from straw bale timber frame cottages to urban brownstones to moderns. She studied issues of justice, ecology, and development in England, India, Nepal, the Philippines, New Zealand, Mexico, and she's even studied abroad for 4 months in Mississippi. Like many architects who become famous later, she designed her parents' house. Her podcast specializes in helping homeowners revitalize mid-century houses, and she has one of her own, a 1952 ranch. Earlier this summer, I was honored to be the first guest on Mid Mod Remodel. Welcome, Della.
Thanks for having me. It's really great to be here.
Catherine Meng hosts the Design Voice podcast out of San Francisco. She features the voices of women in the architecture, engineering, and construction professions. Honest conversations with people who shape our buildings, past and present. With a BA from Cornell, she worked in Houston, Shanghai, and New York City, where she led and designed projects ranging from high-end residential to commercial design. And she's now an architect and senior associate at the DLR Group. Catherine has been featured on Entree Architect and the Madam Architect programs. Her many podcast guests have included Dana Getman, Anthea Wong, and Irina Schneid. And we've had some mutual guests, including Donna Sink, Bethany Burrell, and Julia Gamelina. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, before we get started, have you two met before?
We have not, no. No, we have not met before, so this is very exciting.
I am so thrilled to get you two together because I like you both so much, and I hope that, something comes out of this introduction.
Yes, indeed.
You're such a maven, George.
You could be a matchmaker, George.
Yeah, really. Del, let's start out with you. You have something on your website which I love. It's the Mid-Century Style Quiz. Tell us about that.
Yes. So I find people who are interested in what I do come to me for a variety of reasons. Some people come to me because they have a ranch house and they want to reconfigure the spaces in it. And some people come to me because they love mid-century design and they really want to dig as deeply as possible as they can into investing more mid-century into their perhaps builder-grade 50s ranch house. And it's really helpful for me to know who's who. So I designed a sneaky way to answer that question for myself without asking, because people don't always self-identify as what I would identify them as, by showing them a series of pictures and letting them pick. And then that sort of tells me where they are. And the benefit for people who take the quiz is that they get to identify more of what makes their heart sing when they're looking at style. And it comes at the end with a little, there are 3 answers to the quiz, basically, and you get a customized style guide sent to your email once you've taken it. It's basically just, what do I like better? Pick, I think there might be just 7 or 8 questions, but
it's very short,
been
yes.
remarkably accurate when I've actually met with people after the fact.
Are these like modernist ink blots?
No, they're pictures that I've sourced from my own Instagram,
Metaphor.
From open source things on the internet, different kitchens, different house front doors, different paint colors, things like that.
I took the quiz. And
What did you get?
I believe I came out, I forget what you called it, but I'm someone who likes mid-century modernism, but I like it a little more modern than purist. What is that one?
What is it? Mid-century fusion, is it? Gosh, it's been a while since I made the labels.
Okay. Well, anyway, what I liked about this is after I took the test, I guess a few minutes later, this style guide came to me from you in email, telling me all this useful information about my particular preferences, which was so cool.
Yeah, the reason I started diving into mid-century myself was I got a ranch house and I wanted to know more about what one, let's use quotation marks, air quotes, what one should do with a ranch. And I found that there weren't as many resources handily available for me in this style as there were for if I'd had a cottage. I could have read an entire bookshelf at my local library branch on what to do with your cottage. So I started pulling together resources for myself and then sharing them. And the more I did, the more I found other people were looking for bundled resources, Instagram accounts, Pinterest, books to read, magazines. Obviously, Atomic Ranch is the go-to, but there are other things. And I've really enjoyed cherry picking and then sharing that with people. And I just keep getting more people taking the quiz and writing emails and asking questions. So it's really gratifying.
Well, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Catherine, before we talk about your podcast, I understand that you in high school read The Fountainhead, that classic book. Tell us a little bit, because I think most people haven't read that book. Tell us a little bit about what that's about and how it affected you.
So I'm pretty embarrassed to admit it now because it's pretty cliche, and also I find Ayn Rand kind of crazy now as an adult. But I read it when you read it I read it as a sophomore in high school, and I think before that I had never really, the profession of architecture was never an option for me. I never really realized that there were architects in the world. And so that was my first exposure to not only the idea of architecture, but this concept of like a starchitect. And the book, I haven't read it since high school, but it's essentially, this one man struggle to basically achieve his artistic vision, and like everyone in society is standing in his way. And so I just thought that was so fascinating, both architecture and the idea of an architect. And so I think that first exposed me to architecture. And then I later on in high school was fortunate enough to go on a trip to Europe. And so that, I think, was what sealed the deal when I decided I want to be an architect. Just exploring these cities in Italy and being on top of Brunelleschi's dome in Florence. And I think that was when I decided I wanted to go down this long, torturous path of architecture.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie, Catherine?
I didn't.
Well, let me tell you, and all our audience, it's horrible. I mean, it is horrible. It was made in the late 40s. It stars Gary Cooper, who looks uncomfortable during the entire film because he usually played cowboys or soldiers or something else like that. And with a couple of exceptions, it's almost a comedy now because the dialogue is so stilted and difficult.
Yeah, well, it's probably similar to the dialogue in the book. It's not really a great book.
Yeah.
Now, I'm actually feeling more and more tempted to watch this now, which I hadn't either, based on your recommendation.
Yeah, get a couple drinks and put it on.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's on YouTube. It was 50, 60 years old now, easily. But
it's got to be streamable.
It's probably streamable somewhere. All right, Della, what prompted you to start your podcast? What set that into motion for you?
I think I was inspired by, I'm still sort of on the journey to having a small business. I'm sort of in the borderland between working as a contractor, working on a contract basis for clients and forming a firm, if you will. But as I've been on this journey from what started as, I'm going to take a year off from practice, work on my own project. Oh, wait, someone asked me for advice, I'll help them. Someone else asked me for advice, I'll help them. And it just sort of snowballed. I learned a lot of what I needed to get started from podcasts. And I found it was just such a helpful way to absorb information while I was living my life, while I was doing the dishes, walking the dog. And yet I would stop. I would make audio notes to myself. I would pause it and make a recording, or I would make little written notes. And I thought this could be a great way to put ideas out into the world. And there aren't very many either architecture or modernism podcasts out there, yours being the apex predator of modernism.
Oh, you're so sweet.
What, does that make us like a cheetah or something?
Yeah.
Lion, King of the Jungle, definitely. It's right up there. It's the shining pinnacle. But I just thought there's room for more. I like to listen to multiple people's perspectives on a topic that I'm exploring, learning about, be it social media, business development, whatever. And I just decided it would be fun to explore that as well. So I remember deciding I was going to do it last fall. And I thought I could spend the fall, I think 3 months left in my sort of planning horizon. I was like, I could spend these next 3 months banking episodes and do a big launch in January. And then I thought, what if I just recorded one and put it up on iTunes? And then I did another one. And that's what I ended up doing. I really just threw myself into it, stumbled forward into the idea of podcasting can happen. But it's been really fun. And I've had a number of clients come to me through podcasting, and also a number of people who follow my Instagram or on my email list write to me and say that they've been inspired to do projects based on things I've talked about. So it's super gratifying and feels very interconnected with the mid-century world.
Yeah, I have to say from listening to your show that you make it sound so friendly and easy, and like you're going to guide people like 1, 2, 3 here. It doesn't seem like a daunting thing listening to you.
Well, it's people's homes. I think architecture with a capital A is an education, is a journey, is a profession, is a big thing. But at the same time, design with a lowercase d is something that anyone can be excited about. And people can always tweak and improve their homes. And I'm mostly talking to people who have, 1950s ranch houses. They're not precious. You can make a few mistakes, but I think making an effort taking a leap is more valuable than sort of waiting and feeling really precious about it. So I like to encourage people to experiment.
Now, Catherine, you got your podcast start through an internal company grant. Is that right?
Yes.
How did that work?
Oh, how lovely.
The idea had been kicking around in my brain for a while, and I kept on ignoring that voice. I had wanted to start the podcast because it was something similar to Della that I wanted to listen to but couldn't find. And so, I just love hearing the stories of other women in the profession. And in my mind, it was such a brilliant idea. Like, why doesn't this exist already in podcast form? But I kept on ignoring that voice because, I was like, I'm not a podcaster. I have a real job and I don't have time for this. But an opportunity came up with DLR Group where they give these professional development grants to people. It's basically they fund any passion project that you want. And so I told myself I would apply for this grant. And if I won the grant, it would force me to do the thing which I secretly, like in my heart of hearts, wanted to do. And so sort of a way to force me to get going on this project. And so, spoiler alert, I did win the grant and started the podcast and started it in 2018. And it's been a couple years later. I think I've had 44 episodes now.
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah, so just excited to keep this journey going.
And really great guests, too.
I should say, I really credit my last official firm job tasked me with running their social media, creating blog posts about what we were doing, but also less marketing and more interesting design and sustainability related things around Chicago. And that gave me such a boost. I think really made me feel empowered to speak about design to the general public. And that, getting a grant from your firm to start your own podcast, that's such a great thing. That's really magical.
Catherine, when you're not working or running a podcast, you and your husband are looking top drawer, running symphony dinners. I saw the pictures of those on the web. I mean, really looking sharp. And I understand that you met him at a musical at Cornell. Were you in the musical?
So I was playing piano in the musical, and he was in the audience. And the story goes that his friend was also in the orchestra, and it's sort of a he said, she said, but he said that we met during intermission, and I have no recollection of meeting him until later that evening.
Did he come walking down to the orchestra pit or something and chat you up?
The orchestra, we emerged from behind stage, and we were chatting with people in the audience, and I think I was just so in the zone of, it was in the intermission of the musical, so I just don't remember who I was talking to.
Now, I have to ask, which musical was it?
It was Assassin, Sondheim. So it was very, yeah.
Oh, yeah, very avant-garde, Sondheim still, yes?
Yeah.
So did you have a favorite song from that you like to play?
I don't really remember. I think one of the Jodie Foster songs. It's such a weird musical, but there's definitely a Jodie Foster song that I thought was fun. Yeah.
Now, Catherine, as you built this podcast inside your company, what were some of the most important decisions you made starting it up?
Honestly, the very beginning, I always struggled with, should this actually be a podcast just about women in architecture? I knew that I wanted to interview women in architecture, engineering, construction, but, did I need to sort of market it as such? Could it not just be a podcast about architecture and then all my guests just happen to be women? So that was something that I struggled with in the beginning, and ultimately decided that I would just sort of lean into it and say this is a podcast about women in architecture, but it's something that I've been mulling over the past few years. Should I expand it to showcasing other underrepresented voices in the profession? And so that's one thing that I've been thinking about for a while.
One thing I learned in learning about you, now I knew about women, WOMEN, and I knew about women, WOMYN. That's been around for a while. But now I'm seeing WOMXN. When did that come along?
What?
I think I'm not sure when exactly it came along, but it's definitely, I think it's sort of followed WOMYN. And I think it's, I think it's just a way for people to sort of signify that it's not just about women in the traditional binary sense, but I think it just signifies that you're LGBTQ and trans friendly. I think it's a more inclusive term than just women.
Okay.
With
So
an
it's
MEN, yeah.
WOMXN.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's pronounced the same, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Okay.
now that's where it's tricky. You have to be like in the know. At least WOMYN phonetically makes sense. But
Yeah. It's
You know.
more of a visual. It's like how I think now a lot of people, instead of saying Latino or Latina, they say Latinx.
yeah.
So it's less gendered, yeah.
Right. Now, Della, as you started your podcast, what were some of the most important decisions that you made, choices that you made about how you were going to run it?
That's an interesting question. I think I so much just leapt into it. I decided fairly early on to do a slightly less traditional than guaranteed episode every week format, but to do a season-based format because it seemed less threatening, and one of the other podcasts that I admired most had done that. So I chose to try to theme each season in a way that would be useful to an entry point listener at any point. So my first season was a sort of just general overview perspective of updating the mid-century ranch. My second one was more about specifically getting ready to remodel. The third one, which started at the beginning of COVID, was intended to be a short-term patch on how do you stay home, and grew into, I think it was 14 weeks of content because the shutdown never ended.
Right, because how could we possibly be shut in till the summer or the fall?
I did not see that coming.
No,
I think I started with, I was
anybody
like,
did.
how do you make a home office, and how
Yeah.
can you create more spaces for your family to get away inside your house? And then pretty soon it was summer, and I was giving social justice podcasts because of the protests. And so it had kind of spiraled out of control. And then this season, I've just started again, is more of a high-level perspective on what to have in the back of your head as you remodel. So looking at sustainability and accessibility and questions like that when you plan. But I think for me that was key because since so much of what I do is solo, I have times when I'm just too busy to make podcasts, and I have times when I can cluster and produce a bunch, and then I can have a break without feeling like I've failed my audience. I'm just between seasons. So for me, that was essential.
How many shows do you have in a season?
It really varies. It was supposed to be 6 or 8 in a season, but that third season really, it's kind of 2, I guess. It just spiraled.
Well, it's okay. You just keep us on the edge of our seats as we look forward to the next episode or season coming up.
I try to warn people, what's coming next, and if I'm going to be taking a break, I'll let them know. And at this point, there is a backlog. So I think for someone who's listened to every episode, well, I'm sorry, they're out of luck. But if you're new to the show and I'm taking a break, you can go back and listen to everything that's exists, which is so exciting now.
The back catalog.
Yeah, that's what they're doing on Jeopardy.
Exactly.
That's right.
I just read Alex Trebek's book, which is a really good book. But it's like 2 days every other week that he tapes his shows.
Okay. Yeah, I know they tape them all back to back.
Yeah, 5 in a day.
And there it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine, you've had a lot of guests on your show. I know Adela just had a couple so far. Who have been some of your most interesting guests, Catherine?
I hate to play favorites, but maybe I will. I had these 4 women on recently. They're students at Harvard Graduate School of Design, and they're all Native American. And I think it's the first time that there have been this many Native American students at GSD. And so it was just so fascinating hearing how they found each other at the school. And then together they formed the Harvard Indigenous Design Collective. And first of all, I'm just super inspired whenever I hear students speak because it makes me feel more reassured about the future. But they were just so thoughtful about how they approach design, and also, in consideration of their Native backgrounds and the things that they're doing to push Harvard forward on a lot of these issues. It was just a really great and fun conversation. So that was definitely one of the highlights.
Now, Della, in your podcast, I know you talk a lot about things at the retail level with people in their houses. What are some rookie mistakes that prospective remodelers can make that you'd like them to avoid?
Oh, this is a good question. Thank you. I just encourage people to think about the bones of their house, and honestly, just work within what you've got, work within your era. And for me, working with ranches, that means let's not put shaker cabinet doors in our kitchens. It means let's steer away from the lovely leaded glass Victorian style front door basically just play to your strengths. And you don't have to make your house a modernist museum to make it appropriate for its era. But you're never going to turn a mid-century ranch into a Victorian cottage. You'd be much better off finding a Victorian cottage and working with that. So I think the thing I hear, my own regrets, honestly, a few of the choices I made early on were just a little too generic for the house. And I constantly run into it with clients who say, you know, we moved into the house, we hired a contractor to put a deck on, we changed these 5 things, and now we regret the style of kind of all of them.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the most important advice I can say is take a breath. I totally believe in experimentation and working, but I also think take a breath and think about what you're doing before you make your first move. And also just bear in mind the era and the style of your house before you start making choices, because you can only push something to the edge of its style so far before it starts feeling like a weird mishmash and you lose the thread of it.
Yeah, we call that here the Priscilla Presley syndrome, because Priscilla Presley took a perfectly wonderful John Lautner house in California and turned it into this Italianate Spanish villa, when she just should have gone out and bought the villa.
A villa?
Yeah.
Right.
Already ready to go kind of villa.
They're there, and she could have gotten herself one, I'm sure. Yeah, it's very frustrating to see. I've heard it called remodeling. I've heard it called remangling in the mid-century world, when you basically come in and try to like Victorianize. A lot of 90s and 80s additions or remodels are just devastating to the style. And now a lot of people are buying and flipping ranches and coming in and painting all the brick white and replacing all of the original handles and fixtures with sort of brushed nickel and shaker cabinet doors. And it just makes me want to scream, because it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't make the house feel special or unique or play to its strengths at all. And it destroys so much of the original character. Kind of why I do everything I do, is to stop that from happening.
Well, it may come down to what's on sale at Home Depot this week, you know?
Yeah.
They're sold
but you
something.
can still find things. I mean, I don't think, yes, if you have $1 million to spend on your house, you can make it magic. You can also make it tacky. But you can find, with a little looking, you can even find things at Home Depot that will accent the character of your house rather than diminishing it. I know, because I've done it.
Della, like many architects who became wildly famous later on in their careers, you designed a house for your parents. Tell us about that.
I did. Yeah, I was working at the time for my first firm out of graduate school. Loved them so much, and their specialty was very sustainable houses made out of roundwood timber frames. And so my parents had actually found that architect before I was looking for work out of grad school, and that's how I got the job. And my mom had desired a house by this architect, and she went and met with them, and I tagged along, and they ended up hiring me out of that first meeting because I was just about to graduate, which was very kismet. And I worked there for 4.5 years, and the last project I did for them was my parents' house. They were finally ready to build. So it is the culmination of everything I learned there and all their wildest sustainability dreams. It has a sod roof, it has straw bale walls, it's passive solar, solar hot water, and PV. Just everything we could think about, and it's very small. We went through 13 schematic design iterations to make it as small as possible, each smaller than the last. I wouldn't do that for a regular client, but I did it for my parents.
Yeah. Where do they live?
They live a little bit outside of Madison in the countryside, near a town called Ridgeway, but that has, I don't know, maybe 500 people in it. So they have 44 acres of prairie that they're restoring and this very sustainable house in the middle of nowhere.
Has it been published somewhere? Can people see it?
Let's see, has it? I should know this. It was published in the local weekly paper, Isthmus. I could definitely give you a link for the show notes for that.
Okay.
And a few other places, but not in a national magazine.
Okay.
And did your parents like it?
They love it.
I bet they do.
They brag about it to everyone. There's a funny story. My sister's going to kill me for telling this, but I am an architect and my sister is a doctor, which is just absolutely chopped liver around where my parents live, because every time the two of us go out there and visit and meet someone, they say, "Oh, are you the architect?" And because my parents' house is sort of locally famous. People saw it being built, and it was built by a bunch of local craftsmen and builders from the community, so the local art community knows about it. And so everybody knows that my parents have a daughter who's an architect, but they don't know that they have a daughter who's a doctor. So that really...
Well, you know, if your sister operated on one of your parents, then it would be kind of equivalent.
Right? Save their life? Well,
Yeah,
but
right.
she's not allowed to.
Well, and in 2020, doctors walk on water.
You're right.
So her day's going to
She's
come.
pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In most other families and most other circumstances, she'd be the standout. But I built this weird house in the Driftless region, and so I'm the famous one.
Oh, so
That's
Thanksgiving might be interesting.
It is every year. But
Always in
it's,
families.
It's really fun. They love
Yep.
the house, and I really like it too. It's great to visit. At this point, it doesn't feel like a thing I created so much as their home anymore.
Catherine, when you graduated in 2009, there was a recession, and you took off for China.
Yeah. It
And
was,
you evidently had a great time there, had a great experience.
yeah, so bad timing to graduate in the middle of a recession. I sat around at home in Houston for better part of a year and then decided I would move to China where there were still, construction jobs or architecture jobs available. So I literally Googled, like Shanghai architecture firms and then applied to the first few that came up that looked promising and then was on a plane to Shanghai a few weeks later. And it was it was a very crazy experience, a lot of hard work, but so much fun. And I definitely learned a lot. And it was sort of like, I would say like professional boot camp because I feel like I had to do so many more things there than maybe you normally would in your first job out of architecture school. Like haggling with the contractor on like the contract, like prices of things. And
Are there women architects? Are they common in China or were at the time?
I would say it's fairly common. The firm I worked at was unique. It was a husband-wife team, and the husband was from Switzerland, and the wife was from China. So it was a fairly international office. So did have to brush up on my Mandarin skills, but a lot of people spoke English as well. But after about a year, I missed living in the U.S., so decided to come back home.
And where did you go from there?
I moved to New York City and lived there for about 5 years. And then about 5 years ago, moved to San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah.
For both of you, are you getting sponsors now for your programs, or is that something that you have not thought about yet?
I would love to have sponsors, so I don't know if like Blue Apron's listening, you can call me. But a couple people have reached out, but it didn't really feel like a good fit, and so haven't really taken that to the next level yet. But I think if it's the right sponsor, I would definitely be interested.
We found that in different cities, there's always one or more modernist realtors somewhere. Our sponsor is one, and you may be able to get some support from that person.
Yeah, that's a really great tip.
All right. On our next part here, we're going to do some quick lightning round questions. Short answer. We're going to start with Catherine and then do Della in that order. Catherine, you're first. What is your favorite guilty pleasure? Go.
Eating popcorn.
Eating popcorn. Okay. Della?
I was going to say frozen chocolate chips out of the freezer while I'm working.
All right. Tom, you get to play too. What's your favorite guilty pleasure lately?
Currently, Jet Puff. This marshmallow stuff.
Stay Puff?
Oh,
No, not Stay Puff. They make fluffernutters with it.
Fluffernutters. I don't know this language.
It's marshmallow cream.
Okay.
There's a brand name for it, and I can't believe it's escaping me right now. But my girlfriend has turned me on to it. She's from Pennsylvania. George?
And mine is Robot Chicken. I can't get enough of Robot Chicken late at night on Adult Swim.
Oh, okay.
These little segments.
We were
going
talking about food, and you're going.
Yeah, I'm going in a different direction for guilty pleasure.
an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next question, Catherine. What has been your latest Netflix or Hulu binge?
I recently rewatched the BBC Pride and Prejudice miniseries.
Oh, yes, right.
I love that one.
It was great to rewatch.
Della?
I just got access to Disney Plus through a family member, and I watched all of the Marvel movies, which took me most of the summer, which was really fun.
They're like, what, 15 or something?
Yeah, that's a
I
lot.
think there's more than 20. I think there's 21, but maybe there's 22. There's a lot, and they're of mixed quality, but I really enjoyed just being in the world all summer.
And the first one was what?
Very
Iron
escapist.
Man? Was that the very
The
first
one
one?
was Iron Man in 2008, and then the Hulk, which only sort of counts because they recast it.
Yeah.
And
This is where this Marvel stuff, it's way too complicated.
It's
that's
a
the one thing
universe,
I ordered. I
Tom.
just
I know.
went away into the Marvel universe and lived there all summer.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a good
Very
idea.
escapist.
All right, Tom, what's your latest binge?
Outlander.
Outlander,
Yeah,
the
I'm
Scottish show.
Yep. Oh, yeah, Scottish, or as we call it, the bodice ripping show.
Yes.
Yep.
And I've been watching this adorable British comedy drama called Last Tango in Halifax, which,
That's a good show.
which premiered, I think, in 2012 with its first season, and it comes on every couple of years. It's kind of like Doc Martin, another BBC series, which has been on forever, but they only do a season about every 2 or 3 years. It's kind of fun.
Are they British seasons where they're like 4 shows?
Yeah, 4 to 8 shows, short
Okay.
seasons,
Yeah,
But they're
okay.
longer shows.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's fun. I'll check that out.
an hour, something like that. It's a very adorable premise, and the countryside around Yorkshire where it's filmed is tremendous. Catherine, what advice do you have for startup podcasters?
Do what Della did. Don't overthink it. Just record and put it out. Just start putting them out there.
Okay. Well, now,
Yeah.
Della, I'm asking you the same question, but she's already stolen your answer.
I mean, I'll back myself up. I think it worked. I was totally ready to psych myself out and make a whole bunch of content and then feel like it could be perfected before I released it. But I think I had a warning about a week for my email list, and then I made one and released it. And it very much breaks your perfectionist instincts to just put it in the world and then let it go.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
Good. Where can people reach you, Catherine, if they want to get in touch?
So you can go to designvoicepodcast.com, or you can email me at hello@designvoicepodcast.com.
And Della?
You can find me at my website, which is midmod-midwest.com, or on Instagram, which is midmodmidwest. And I reply very promptly to all direct messages. Or you can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. It's Mid Mod Remodel.
Thank you both. This has been delightful. I'm so
Yeah.
happy to chat with both of you and get you talking to each other.
Yes, it's been such a fun time.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
And now, a few minutes with architect Frank Harmon, reading from his book, Native Places.
Smells like rain. The hunter sat waiting and looking up in a beechwood. The leaves were whispering faintly over my head, wrote Ivan Turgenev. You could have told the time of year from their whisper alone. Partly cloudy, wind north-northwest, 62 degrees Fahrenheit, a weather app might have reported. But there was no weather app. Turgenev wrote these words in 1846. Recently, I noticed that I was checking the weather a dozen times a day on my smartphone, tracing the rain on radar, and completely missing the experience of the weather itself. So for the last 6 weeks, I've turned off the app and rediscovered the smell of rain. I've watched the leaves on live oak trees, suffused with red violet at dawn, and tried to guess the weather from their whispering. I like this new freedom. The other day, after I'd cut the grass and raked the paths, I sat outside sniffing the weather at sunset. The grass was soft. Clouds drifted by. Night descended. A weather app on somebody else's phone probably read, rain, 40 degrees precip, wind southwest, 4 miles an hour, 67 degrees. I heard a cricket chirp.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for modernist houses. Okay, Tom, take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 8,000 significant modernist houses, and access 3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Carrie Cesarino researches guest while juggling 2 above-average children, a flaming sword, a bowling ball, and a bottle of Dom Perignon 1963. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.